For most of human history, wars have been waged by men. It wasn't until the 1990s that the U.S. military began to allow women to serve in combat zones. But it didn't take a machine gun for women to be involved in war, both on the battlefront and the home front. Wisconsin has a long history of women in the military. One of the earliest we found was Harriet Douglas Wheaton, an Army nurse in the Civil War. She served on hospital ships from 1862 to 1865. In World War I, about 200 Wisconsin women served in the Army Nurse Corps. Among them, 23-year-old Helen Bulovsky of Madison, who served in field hospitals near the front lines in Europe. The Wisconsin Veterans Museum has preserved many of the letters she wrote home to her family.
We get the boys as they come from the field, and it certainly is terrible. We get the Germans as well as our own, and we give them equal treatment, but our own boys first. I had 5 German prisoners between 14 and 15 years of age, and they were glad they were prisoners.
In the Second World War, the government estimates a total of 135,000 women served in the U.S. military. Marcia Gates of Cambridge was one of them. An Army nurse in the Philippines, Lieutenant Gates was one of 68 American nurses captured and held prisoner by the Japanese for nearly 3 years. Her family didn't know if she was alive for much of that time.
One interesting thing about the Japanese regulations was the fact that if any Japanese soldier molested one of the girls or did anything he wasn't supposed to, and we reported it, he was immediately shot. But they also shot the person who reported it. As a result, you can be sure we did very little reporting.
Gates helped care for the American POWs forced by the Japanese to endure the brutal Bataan Death March. Among those prisoners, the Janesville 99, members of a tank unit from Rock County. Just 32 of the 99 survived their ordeal. Known as one of the angels of Bataan, Marcia Gates barely survived.
When Marcia got home, she was completely mute. Could not utter a sound, not even so much as hello to her own mother, until the first of the guys from the Janesville 99, the first 3 or 4 of them, got home. She could carry on an absolutely normal conversation with them, and when she was okay with them, she was fine with everybody else. But they were her security blanket. You know, they understood, and nobody else could possibly have a clue.
On the home front, World War II also created thousands of one-parent households, some temporary, others permanent. Richard Haney experienced the latter when his father was killed fighting in Europe.
Of course, he had life insurance policies, but after he was killed, Mom couldn't collect on those life insurance policies because there was a war clause in all of them. And this was common nationwide. It wasn't just my mother.
Women in general are not as strong as men.
With husbands, fathers, and brothers all away at war, a generation of young American women had to learn to do things their mothers never imagined doing.
Drive the car. Change the flat tire on the car. Fix the plumbing. Patch the leak in the roof. You know, it's endless.
In fact, it was only the beginning for many who now also had to find a job. And in this part of Wisconsin in World War II, hundreds of them found work at the Badger Ordnance Plant.
I made 68 cents an hour when I started here. The job, you really didn't need to know much except to be alert, be able to stand on your feet, get along with people, and stay awake, which wasn't easy when you first came in here because of the ether.
They made the propellant for bullets and rockets, and they were called WOWs, Women Ordnance Workers, also known as Powder Pollies, Badger's version of Rosie the Riveter. Now, at first, plant managers at Badger avoided hiring women for all the stereotypical reasons, but soon they had no choice. Most able-bodied men were away in the military, and by the end of World War II, half the plant workforce were WOWs.
They tended to be more careful. They tended to follow instructions more so than the men, and they were neater. And when you're handling explosives, and you're being trained really to do just one job and do it well, it helps if you follow instructions. So
Besides the paycheck, there was also a patriotic reason for some women who worked at Badger.
there could have been a club of women who worked for their husbands to support their husbands in World War II, and then came back to support their sons during the Vietnam era.
When it was over, the end of World War II often created a new conflict on the home front.
When fathers and husbands and brothers came home from the war, those who came home, a generation of women who'd learned to become very independent and self-sufficient didn't suddenly unlearn those skills. Gender relations had changed forever.
It was a turning point in what would grow into the women's liberation movement in America.